This episode is brought to you by Summer School Electronics. With pedals like the Snow Day Delay, the Pep Rally Fuzz, the Trash Panda, and my personal favorite, the Science Fair, which is two classic dirt pedals in one, with a mid-boosted overdrive on one side, a black lab rat circuit on the other, and a blend knob to blend between them to find the perfect classic stacked dirt sound you're looking for, it's hard not to find something you'll love. Mark builds all of his pedals by hand in Syracuse, New York, where he also works as a full-time educator. In addition to the super fun graphics on their pedals, Mark also offers custom artwork. Want your dog's face on a pedal? He can do it. Want your face on a pedal? He can make that happen too. Go over to summerschoolelectronics.com and make sure to tell him that 40 Watt Podcast sent you. This episode is brought to you by the supporters of 40 Watt Podcast over on Patreon. Go over to patreon.com/40wattpodcast, where for as little as $3 per month, you can help support the podcast and get every episode ad-free. For $5 a month, you'll get every episode ad-free, as well as a bonus episode every week. I can't overstate how thankful I am for the support of my patrons, and hope you'll consider joining the team and helping keep this show on the road. 40 Watters, welcome to this week's episode, 40 Watt Podcast. Pumped to be back this week. Y'all, I'm going to be honest. I plan on skipping this week because y'all know how summer gets for me. I basically become a once every 2 weeks, a fortnightly podcast, as it were, if you want to use some of them high dollar words. But, you know, there's a lot of cool things happening. I had some time. I got a guest lined up that I was really excited to talk to. So we're going to do it. Before we get started, though, we're going to talk about a couple of things here at the top. We're going to talk about sponsors of the podcast. This week, as you will hear all year long, all season 4 long, y'all, we're halfway through season 4. We're going into July next week. Got Grez Guitars. Barry at Grez Guitars makes some of my favorite guitars, just period. If you want a guitar that's unique, that plays like nobody's business, resonates more than any other guitar that I own. Did I mention they're extremely light? I have a baritone from Barry, and I think it's 5.5 pounds. It's just completely insane how good Grez guitars are. They've got a lot of cool things. They've got a bass. They've got a short scale bass. They've got a bass 6 for you crazy, insane folks that need 6 bass strings. It's different. I know it's not like a regular 6-string bass, y'all. I know these things. That's Ibanez's territory for those other 6-string basses. That's where I get all the bass hate right there. That's the thing I said that's going to go viral and everyone's going to hate me for it. But no, Barry's making some of the coolest guitars. I'm working on a project with Barry. Very excited about it. I can't talk more than that about it. So hopefully you'll hear about it in the relative soon future. I don't know how long. I don't do these things. I just talk to Barry and he builds amazing stuff. So go over to Barry's Instagram, go over to his website. Both are linked down below in the description or the show notes. Check him out. I appreciate his support. It makes this show keep happening. Also supporting the show are Patreon supporters. Y'all already heard the spiel if you're not Patreon supporters, because it's at the beginning of the show and you don't get to skip those ads if you're not a Patreon supporter. I appreciate all of my supporters. Thankfully, I've got enough of y'all now that if I read all of your names, I was going to take 5 minutes at the top of every episode, so I don't. But I do want to thank Ryan from Aviate Audio, last week's guest, my most recent $5 Patreon supporters. I sincerely... I'm just incredibly thankful for everyone who's willing to help make this show continue to happen. It means the absolute world to me. When I started this podcast, I never expected this to happen. I literally was hoping for 100 downloads in my first season. And to have it here 4 years later is pretty unbelievable. So go over to patreon.com/40wattpodcast if you want to also help make this show happen. All right. Done. That was a long intro. This week, I've got my buddy, Jeremy, the Guitar Hunter, on the show. Jeremy, how are you doing, sir?
Hello, man. It's good to be here. I'm doing really well. I am getting ready to move to Louisiana. We'll talk about this, I'm sure.
Yes.
But I'm in this hurry up and wait. The house is sold. The studio's packed down. Mm-hmm. And I'm just kind of hanging out for a couple weeks.
Man, that's not the worst place to be. You know what I mean?
Seriously, but I'm not. I mean, I have hustle. I don't know where it comes from, but I don't like sitting still. I don't like not having things to do. And so in my free time, I just go and buy guitars and make YouTube videos.
Yeah, in Bojangles parking lots, apparently.
Seriously, I got a 335.
Look, if that's where all the 335s are, I'm going to hang out at Bojangles a whole lot more. I've kind of avoided it, to be honest, but it's not that popular down here in Mississippi. It's not really a thing here.
No. I think it's a North Carolina thing. It's a mid-Atlantic kind of thing. But anyway, yeah, I mean, it's I bought worse guitars in better places.
There you go. Me too. So you're getting ready to move. You're moving down to, I know you said it in your video, so I don't feel bad just saying Covington, Louisiana, which is,
don't tell my wife funny. We said it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We won't say a word. So I love Covington. I love that whole town. My wife and I used to live near there. So
I always forget that. It's amazing the amount of connections there are. So if you know, like South Louisiana is the shape of a boot. There's a lake in the middle of it. We're just on the north side of that lake. And but it's a magical place. I'm super excited to be back there. So I lived there for 6 years.
Right.
And then we moved up here to the mountains, and now we're going back.
We've talked about this before on previous episodes about, especially in what you do and finding and reselling and just telling stories from guitars. The guitars you find in Louisiana they can be real special.
Oh gosh. It's still there are a couple that have just changed my life. I mean, there's one, and it's funny. I had a YouTube channel before my YouTube channel that disappeared. It was like for a different email account, and I stopped paying for the email account, and then all the videos went away, and I didn't know it.
That sucks.
But I had a video where I bought no one watched it, so no one really missed out, but I don't have the file. But I bought a 1939 Martin 0017 from a guy on a shrimp boat in Lafourche Parish, Louisiana.
And if y'all think those smokers guitars smell funny,
gosh, it was like packing it full of baggies of baking soda for weeks. It smelled,
oh man,
it was so stanky.
Yeah, but for something like that, for such a legitimate vintage amazing piece, those are what you do. So it's absolutely what you have to do sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have to deal with it. I've got a so I went to, and I think pretty sure I've talked about this on the podcast already. You do enough of these, you forget what you've said.
Right.
But I went to the Amigo Guitar Show in Franklin, Tennessee, and I bought a 1965 ES-125 CD. Which is the big bodied. It's like a poor man's 175. I say poor man. That it wasn't priced like a poor man's anything. But like the guitar is great. The case, every time I open it, I'm like, oh, there's the cigarette smell. there it is. It's not bad. It's faint. But in this world where I don't go out to eat and smell cigarette smoke anymore, I don't go to bars and smell cigarette smoke anymore. It's really obvious to me, even though it's faint now.
Yeah,
so.
Seriously. That's what, when I think of, I have trauma around the smell of Febreze. So when I was in middle school band, my dad didn't want to rent a saxophone for me. So we borrowed my uncle's, he was a chain smoker. And so it was like cigarette smoke, mildew. And then my dad was like patient zero on blasting things with Febreze. And I still mildew cigarettes and Febreze.
Yeah, and you're just breathing into that thing.
It was awful.
Yeah, I'm not playing guitar with my mouth, so like that's a totally different experience.
I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, because you're blowing.
I'm so sorry for that new trauma.
Because you're like blowing through it, and it's just coming out of all the pads and the bell and all that.
Yeah, that's awful. Let's just all ruminate in that horror for just a moment here.
Yeah.
But yeah, like other than the smells, there's some interesting stuff in Louisiana. I see it all the time on like my Facebook Marketplace because I'm close enough that I get the listings, but I'm too far away to take advantage of them. You know what I mean? There's just cool stuff popping up there all the time. It's
a whole bunch of layers. It's how many people live in that part of the world, how much music has played in that part of the world. And it's just the volume and rate at which stuff gets posted to Craigslist and Facebook. So like I'm in the Shenandoah Valley. I mean, other than Old Martin's, there's not much. And so, but like in New Orleans, it's on the Craigslist, like every day there's 400 or 500 things to get listed. And so like you will, like, if you look at the front page, you're not going to see stuff, which it makes it harder to sell. You're like, it's just you're getting pushed down. And so unless
It's like
you're
posting on the
refreshing,
Nashville Craigslist.
seriously. Yeah. So I mean, so I'm super excited to move back for that, and I'll be in a sales job. So I've been wrestling with feeling like a bit of a sellout, not doing YouTube full time. But I'll be in a sales job that I'll be covering 3 states, and I will be back because I have bought and sold a whole bunch of guitars before I showed anybody what I was doing. You know, it was just fine old Martins, and I kept some, I sold some, and I'm excited to get to do that again.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited. I'm excited to now have someone in the New Orleans area that I could say, hey, can I send you some money and you go grab this for me?
Yes.
Someone who understands what they're doing too, not just sending, rando friend that happens to live in the area.
Yeah.
So
I've only ever done that. So my brother, the closest I've ever come to buying a burst, there was a 1960 burst. This is in 2006. I was a sophomore in college. And what seemed to be a totally legit, like my grandpa's old guitar was the name of the listing. It was for sale in the Fan in Richmond, Virginia. My brother was going to VCU. I called him. I was like, hey, how much money do you have in your bank account? Go buy this guitar. And he was like, I have $1,200. I was like, I will bring you $1,200 today if you can get this guitar. And when he got there, he's like, there were 4 people in the hallway waiting, and the guy had already sold it.
Wow.
But but he got the serial number, and 2 weeks later, I saw it at the Philly Guitar Show, and it sold for $280,000. So that could have been me at 19.
Oh, that's like life-changing money.
Yeah,
like,
right?
I know that it doesn't sound like it, but that's the profit on that would pay off my house kind of money. You know what I mean?
That's what like, I mean, I bought and sold guitars and paid for college. That's how, and I mean that, and then I made $8 an hour working at the actual shop.
It's such a wild world, and that's the kind of thing. And I have friends, and we've talked about this on previous podcasts. I have friends who ask me about the deals I find. Now I find them less often now, and that's another thing we're going to talk about here in a minute. But that's one of the things my friends used to ask me. It's like, how do you find these deals? And I'm like, that's because I'm not looking for a specific piece of gear.
Yeah.
I'm looking for the deal. I'm not looking for, I'm looking for a gold top Les Paul between these years and this weight.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I feel like you can get a deal, or you can be picky. You don't get to be both. And so with that, and that's what's funny. Like I wound up with my pink paisley. It's an 86. It's made in Japan. At the time, I thought I way overpaid for it. I paid $1,000.
At the time you did.
Yeah. I mean, this is 2014 or so. I bought that one.
Yeah. I was thinking it was earlier. Oh, well, that's not awful then.
Yeah. So I paid $1,000, and it came in a 70s like Fender case. At the time, I thought I was in it too deep, but I loved it. But now they're $2,500. But that's that's one of the very few guitars that is like I will never sell. It has just become. But I mean, before that, I liked pink paisley, but I just saw it and thought it was cool, and it seemed like a good deal. And so I think that's one of those, like you said it exactly. You don't get to be that specific. Like I have like a couple degrees of the compass of what I could find that I'm like, okay, I will go crazy for old Martins, old Gibson acoustics, certain Fenders. But like if a Parker Fly shows up, I'm like, I don't know. Like that's not my thing. I'll just let it go.
Yeah. Well, that's good because resale on those is trash.
Oh, really?
They're not. It's not a great price point right now for Parker Flies. The ones I've seen, because there are a few in a certain radius from me right now that have been for sale for a while, and the prices dipped low enough that I was like, "Can I do something with this?"
Yeah.
No. The reality is, no, you can't. Like nobody wants them. Now there's a couple I haven't seen in person, but I've yet to run across a Parker guitar period that was fully functional. That was for sale. Like something was wrong, whether the electronics were like just corroded out, or significant enough nicks to finish and headstock, and just enough that I'm like, I'm not gonna hold on to this for 6 to 10 months to try to sell it.
Yeah. I mean, and I mean there are other guitars that I'm in the same boat, like Rickenbackers. I'm like, cool. I don't know. Like, yeah. So there's some of those, like, know your lane, and then that's where you get, like, if the question is how do you get good deals, it's like, well, don't be picky. Pick a couple, but find a couple things that you know a lot about and can jump on quickly. And then the other thing is just orient yourself so that your schedule can be flexible and have some cash. That's just your, like,
That's a big one. That's a real big one. Have cash available. Don't have to liquidate something to get the deal so that you can then sell or keep. You know, that's the thing. We're not just talking about flipping here, because I've definitely bought a few things that I thought I was getting because it was too good of a deal, and then I just loved it. And I just like, no, I can't sell this. I have to keep this.
I absolutely
like
get
you
that.
did with your Paisley. I keep thinking back to the mid 2000s when you could find those Paisley Telecaster for like $500 and $600.
I know,
And I'm
right?
like, oh my gosh.
Well, that's the number I had in my head. So when I paid $1,000, I was like, what have you done? And then I, like, swapped the pickups and the hardware and, like, made it my own. I'm like, well, now I'm in at $1,500.
Right.
But now, like, two of them, 286s just sold, one for $3,100 and one for $25. I'm like, okay, like, but yeah.
While we're on this, let's continue to talk about prices, because this has been a thing that's been ongoing. We message on Marco Polo, we message on, like, other things where we're talking about prices of things. Right now, I think I said this in Discord, in the podcast Discord, which, by the way, listeners, if you're a Discord person, we have a Discord server. You can come chat with us and hang out. Just be cool. That's all I ask. No rules other than that. Just be cool. This is the softest market I've seen since post 2008 collapse.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This is it. It's like 2009 all over again without the housing collapse part of it.
Yeah. It's quite different in that way. I see less grown men crying when I'm buying guitars from them now.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry,
it's more.
That never happened.
But it's a real thing, though. Like, it's a joke, but there's less people selling their guitars because they need to make their mortgage payment, and it's more people selling because they overbought during the pandemic.
Exactly.
And they've got too much gear, and now the used market is saturated with gear. I'm seeing literally today, as of recording, y'all, we're recording this the day before it releases, so we're recording on June 27th of 2024. I saw today at least 6 primo Les Paul traditionals or classics between $1,200 and $1,400.
Oh, that's awesome.
I've seen 4 Les Paul standards in the last 48 hours selling between $1,600 and $1,800.
Okay.
I use Les Paul as a good metric.
I think so too.
It's a popular guitar.
Yeah.
There's usually a pretty good demand for them. It's an insane low price.
Yeah, I used D18s and D28s. And so, I mean, D28s are still strong. They're $2,200 to $2,500. Yeah. Those are still up from 10 years ago. You know, D18s 10 years ago were $1,200 to $1,600.
Sure.
Now they're $1,800 to $2,200, and then I think right now, if you are panicking about the price of things, or just things are still selling, they're just selling slower. Like, I've gotten full asking price on everything I've sold. It just takes, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and I'm at a different clip. Like, I turn stuff quickly, and I've got a lot of eyeballs on what I've got coming and going. But you're still getting, most people can still get those prices. But if you really need it, that's the hard part. If you need to sell it quickly, that's when you're gonna, you just have to come down on price.
Yeah. And I've posted stuff. I've been selling stuff lately just because I needed to get rid of some of the clutter. Like, I'm never going to get rid of all the clutter because I'm attached to some things. But I have broken some attachment to a few things lately because I'm like, look, my mantra has become, you can't keep it all. And you can't, even if you want to. You got to be a little realistic about it. But then there's also been some things that I listed at, like, top of current used prices that I've seen. And I've been sort of, if it sells, it sells. that's great.
Yeah.
I'm not willing to come down too low on it. That stuff sits and it doesn't hurt my feelings.
Yeah. So in January, I started realizing I had too many guitars. So then I made the mistake of counting. And I had 53 guitars. I know it's the most I'd ever had, and a bunch of them were just from the from the rhythm of making YouTube videos, stuff to shows, and then I don't know if you have this, like you'll get certain ones where brands will require you to own things for a certain amount of time.
I haven't had that happen yet. Like I'm not even dealt with big brands in that way though.
Yeah, so I've had a couple where I had to make a spreadsheet where I'm like, well, I don't like that guitar necessarily. Like I don't dislike it, but I'm not going to keep it. But I can't sell it until March 1st. I can sell that guitar. But in January I realized I had too many guitars. I then like cranked out, and I just shipped almost every one of my guitars is in Louisiana already. At a friend with a studio, and I'm down to like 17 guitars all in.
Wow.
I think it's 19 if you count my 2 mandolins.
I'll be honest, and just knowing you for the years I've known you now, you're not the type of person that I think of as having, like, even double-digit guitars feels heavy for you, like who you are as just a guitar person. You know, not just player, not just owner, not just collector, not just reseller. And I feel the same way, and yet I've got a spreadsheet because I do it for insurance purposes, and but all of them need updating now because of selling and buying and stuff like that. But it's like there's a point where you like having guitars and you like playing guitars and you love to have them around. We do. We're guitar players. But at some point, maybe you're like me. I got to where I had so much stuff that it stressed me out.
Oh yeah,
like. Just anxiety out of nowhere. There's no good reason for it. It's just too much.
And then you get to where you're like, am I good enough to own all these guitars? Like,
oh man,
how many guitars is enough? So I worked through that over the last couple of months. I made a video a little bit called Enough is Enough, where I worked through like, hey, like you're made to make stuff. Like humans are made to be creative. And so you should do that. But they also like, enough guitars is the amount of guitars that doesn't ask your family to sacrifice too much. It doesn't impact your family's finances, because that's where, and I got into an argument with a big guitar retailer a couple months ago, and it was, I don't get heated, but this was a like, all right, we are completely disagreeing on this. Where and the whole thing was, if you're a guitar retailer, is it okay for you to make fake like receipts to show different prices, or is it okay to split payments over multiple credit cards, or to do some on layaway? And I was like, no, I think that is always a bad idea.
Yeah. So let's hang out here for just a second, because it was literally just today I was reading a whole thread. I can't remember if it was on Facebook or somewhere, where people were talking about that whole it was on Facebook. Someone talked about they bought something, but they had it shipped to work, so their wife didn't discover it. Or listen, y'all, I really need you to hear me here. If you are hiding purchases from your family and your spouse, there's a disconnect that needs to be repaired that has nothing to do with your guitars.
Yeah.
Because that's just real talk. I'm just trying to be real with people. My wife is extremely supportive. Occasionally, she'll have a conversation with me. It's very rare. I think maybe twice ever. She's like, maybe we need to slow down a little. And I'll be like, you know what? You're right. Yeah. You're absolutely right. One of the times it was absolutely you're right. The second one was, yes, I know this stuff has come in, but this stuff is about to go out. It's already sold. I'm shipping it out like tomorrow or whatever, those kinds of things. But for the most part, she and I have conversations about everything I purchased. And we have an understanding that, when it comes down to, we really need to start saving some money to do this thing or to buy this, or like we're starting to work on our backyard now. Yeah. And like, y'all yard work, and like we want to put up like a gazebo, pergola, something thing in our backyard. Got to put money away for it.
Seriously.
And so we have those conversations. Y'all have those conversations.
And that's where, and I know I'm not, this is not the only opinion that people can have on this. I think for me, like guitars have to be like, if the best version of myself is the one that plays guitar, like it has to then spill out into being like, well, the best version of me as a husband is also like guitars are good for me and then good for my family, good for my
Yeah.
kids. And I think sometimes the rub in my life is just storage. Like 51
Yeah.
guitars and I live in 1,000 square foot house. And
Just the cases
seriously,
alone.
like, and I showed you before we started, like I have 2
Yeah.
metal racks. At one point I had 4 of those. And it's like I can fit about 14 guitars or 12 guitars on each rack. But then you get to where like, I mean, I was spending like so much money on strings and something, and then it's like before I ever play guitar, I'm like, well, this pot is scratchy and this switch isn't working and I broke that cable last week. So
Mm-hmm.
it just gets to being too much. Yeah.
Exactly. No, and the case thing, I have to take into account in my. So one of the things that we did in my household is there is a gear fund.
Mm-hmm.
There is a separate checking account
Yep.
that is entirely meant for when I buy and sell gear, when I play gigs, any money from gigging or
Yeah.
from the podcast or any of that stuff goes in that account because it's not how we pay our bills. It's not
Mm-hmm.
how we take vacations. It's that. Now, have I ever pulled from that to pay a bill or
Mm-hmm.
to go on vacation? Absolutely, I have because
Yeah.
that's where it is.
Yeah. And
But
we run most everything as a business. So it comes like for us, it's like every dollar that comes out is getting taxed as income. Like,
yeah.
so that's where, anyway, I do want to come back to like the market at large. I think
Oh, sure. I'll add this though. One of the things just to wrap on the cases real fast.
Yeah.
Sorry, y'all. One of the expenses that comes out of that account every month is a storage unit where I store all the cases.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I have most of my cases, my PA, mic stands, those kinds of stuff that I don't use every day, but I need it when I gig or when I do other things. All that stuff gets in a storage unit that comes out of the gear fund every month.
Yeah. What I've done in the past is like if I have an office or like I'll store some guitars there. I hadn't thought about doing cases. I'm always like if there's a fire, if it's raining and I need to take the guitar, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Yeah.
I keep gig bags here. Stuff I actually will grab and go to a gig with.
Yeah.
I'll keep the gig bags here, but like the hard cases and stuff, no, storage unit.
And there's certain stuff that you can just like clear out the noise. Like I just got rid of, I had like, it was probably a 16 by 16 cube box that was probably 50 or 60 old guitar cables and patch cables and speaker cables. And it's like probably half of them, something's wrong with it. Like it needs to be resoldered or a new end. I've moved with that box. Like I've had it for 10 years and I'm like, I have never once needed a cable and not had a current cable that works. So there's a friend of mine who's in college and he's getting into guitar stuff. I was like, you can have this box. And and here's my old soldering iron, learn to
mine's IEC cables.
Yeah.
They reproduce.
Yeah.
I'm completely sure they reproduce because I weeded out a ton of them about 2 years ago. And I swear I'm right back up to where I was. I don't know where they're coming from.
But have you seen how expensive patch cables are now?
Yeah.
When you're like, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're $11 a piece for like, the flat Ernie Ball ones or.
Yeah. Oh, I use the Tour Gear design. By the way, listeners, you can get 10% discount. It's down in the comment in the description below of Tour Gear design. They're my favorite patch cables. They're not super expensive. They have the tiniest plug that I've ever seen.
That's awesome. I use there's a guy in Richmond, Virginia called Judd Cables that I use, and there's a coupon code over there on my stuff.
Yeah, look at that. Look at us advertising. Yeah. Sorry, y'all. We are shills. We do this to also earn money and talk about gear. So we'll digress back to the market at large because it's interesting right now.
I think if you're panicking right now, you're too zoomed in on the spreadsheet. It's the same kind of thing. If you look at your investments, if you have money in mutual funds or the stock market, if you look every day, you're asking for heartache.
Yeah.
So just don't look at it for a while. Like if you don't have to sell stuff, probably wait a year or two. Because if you look at the market over long stretches of time. So one of the tools that's really helpful, and they're pretty cheap, is to buy the vintage guitar price guide. I buy one every year. I just recently went through and I bought like the last 20 years worth of them.
Oh, really?
Because this was a video that never turned into anything, or maybe it will one day. But I just went through, I was like, what have things been worth for the last 20 years? And like a Les Paul Classic has been 14 to 1800 bucks for 20 years, and then the last 2 years. So it is helpful. Like the price guide is the most removed from reality, or it's removed from the volatility. Reverb is the most helpful for like actual transactions. They now give you the 2-year window. And that shows you the two things that are so interesting are like, when you look at the price guide, especially when you look back, I guess we don't see it anymore. Was it 2020 or 21? It was when Joe Biden, when like they would give the $600 or whatever the chunk of money was.
Oh, yeah. Well, the first one was actually still under the Trump administration.
Yes.
So I actually used that first one to buy my Apollo Twin that I'm talking through right now.
Yeah. You and a bunch of other people. What's hilarious is the data on that. You look at like a Hot Rod Deluxe has been $350 to $450.
Yep.
But a whole lot of them sold for $600. And then Les Paul Studios that are like $800 to $1,000, a whole lot of those sold for around $600, $700. So those came down during COVID. Other things came up.
So during COVID, the reason I was able to buy a lot of the gear that I was able to buy later was because I took advantage of the high prices on stuff that I just didn't need at the time. Yep. I was like really, in fact, I'm working on this video of how to know when it's time to sell something. Yeah. Right. And one of those key points in the video that I'm working on is when the market value, not the real or perceived, like the market value of something becomes high enough that it is no longer worth that to you. Like,
would you buy it at that price?
Yeah, exactly. And that's a hard thing to quantify. But like one of the things I sold was a Behringer digital mixer, like the XR18, I think was the model number. This podcast is supported in part by Stringjoy Strings. I'm a snob. At least that's what people tell me. I'm never okay with good enough. And that's where Stringjoy Strings come in. They're better than good enough. They're the best. Stringjoy are making some of the finest strings available today right up the road from me in Nashville, Tennessee. They offer custom sets, balanced tension, coated strings, the works. If you need it, they can probably make it happen. You should be using Stringjoy Strings, and if you're going to order from them, you really could help this podcast out by clicking the affiliate link down in the description or show notes below. You get amazing strings, I get a little bit of that back to help the show keep going. It's a win-win situation. Get your Stringjoy Strings today. The prices skyrocketed, which I didn't understand because we were at a time when gigs weren't happening.
No, but I bet it was like churches streaming stuff, or
that's true. I didn't think about that. So I had this XR18 that I bought for like $300. Yeah, used, right? And suddenly they were going for like $700-800 used because there were no new ones in stock. And so I was like, buy. That's gone. So, at some point you have to decide that like this has risen in value enough that, especially I can now that I don't need one now, I have a different mixer, but I could go buy one for really affordable prices now if I needed one again.
Well, that's where like, I think there are different tiers of those things too. Like if it's a guitar where like something you're interfacing with and there's a level of like art to its construction, with that, it's like, it's a tool. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff that's tools. I sold some condenser mics during that same time. I'm like, I don't care about recording stuff that much. And so, I doubled and tripled money on stuff. I always, and this sounds really callous, I like money more than I like a lot of guitars and stuff.
Look, it's not callous. We live in a capitalist society for good or bad. However, whatever your view, listener, is on that, that's where we are. And when you are trying to maintain your house and put food on the table and, put gas in the car and take care of your kids, you got to make money. And I too, I don't have kids, but you know, if it came down to, hey, I can pay next to mortgages on my house
Seriously.
if I sell this right now, this thing I don't really need, that I'm not really attached to, especially as pedals are a big one to me. It's like, yeah, they're cool to have, and like the beauty of pedals is that they're for guitar players, they're the closest thing we have to impulse purchases.
Yeah.
Like at price points,
And they're
you
like
buy a
trading
bunch.
cards.
Yeah. And so you keep them around, but also, unless it's something you absolutely can't get again and you absolutely love it and use it all the time, let it go. Buy it again later if you need it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where there's certainly some of that stuff that's more, you can find another one. What's happened to me over the last couple of years is I've become really close with builders, and I just like I have several guitars that are built for me or with me in mind. I'm friends with the person that built it. Like my Paget, there are 3 of those in existence, and Ben's not making any more right now. And I just love that guitar. I just had a Zonfleet, a guitar made by this kid who's amazing. He just turned 18.
Oh yeah, I heard about him.
He's
on Fretboard Journal.
That was so cool. That he was interviewed on that, and he's amazing. So I got to where I have all these guitars that I'm like, if I sell this, I will never find another one. And so that's the stuff that I'm sticking with. Like in that 17 guitars, it's like only a couple I could buy again. So I did sell the biggest one I sold that I really was so sad about was my Waterloo WLS. It was so good. I bought it. It was not anything close to what I thought I would be into. It's like an LOO. It's ladder braced. I'm like, this is not my thing. This is a thumpy Delta Blues thing. Yeah. And I got it, and it lit something on fire inside my heart and soul. And I had that guitar for 2.5 years, and my wife was like, don't sell that one. That one's too good. And then in like 21 or 22, they doubled. Like, oh yeah, they were $3,500.
They couldn't build them fast enough at that point.
They stopped. So they stopped building they stopped building all the Waterloos and put those Luthiers on Collings to keep up.
Yeah, I had Nully on the podcast a little while back, and he talked about that time period a lot.
Right.
Like Nully's the head of manufacturing. Don't get me wrong, Nully is an incredible guitar builder. Yeah. So don't let that title make you think he doesn't know how to build a guitar. But at that point, it was like him and like 4 other folks in the shop. Like, we now have to build everything.
That's what they told me. I talked to some of the guys at Collings about a year ago. But that guitar, and it's also like my videos had hyped up that particular guitar so much that somebody close to me, like a couple hours away from me in Virginia, reached out and said, hey, I want to buy this guitar. I want to own it forever. I will pay you $3,400 for it. I'll buy you lunch when you come here, and I'll pay your gas coming and going. I was like, oh my gosh, it was so hard. But that dude loves that guitar. It's perfect. It worked out. And then that's why around that time was when we started designing the Zonfleet, and I was like, well, I'm going to build this one. So it's like that guitar, but a little more Martin-y.
I played recently, literally yesterday, I played a local guy. It's actually our local amp tech, who's incredible. He's really amazing. I've actually got a couple of things I need to take to him. No big deal, no big issues, but a couple of things I wanted to peek at. But he's got a bunch of great vintage guitars. He's got like a 1966 Strat, and he's got a. I took him the 65 125 for him to check out, because he's like the only other person I know in town who just gives 2 flips about vintage guitars. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I took it to him. He's like, "Oh, you like vintage Gibsons? Check this out." And he pulled this out. It's a 40s. I think he said 49 LOO.
Oh,
he's got, and he pulled it out. It's in tune. It's perfect. He said, my mom bought this when she was however old it was. And and that's exactly what I did. I started playing Robert Johnson tunes on it immediately. Seriously. I was like, that's what this guitar's for.
Seriously. That guitar is, Mississippi Delta. Gosh, that's awesome. Was it a Sunburst or was it black?
It was a burst.
Oh gosh, that's harder to find.
Yeah, it was extremely cool. And he keeps them at the shop, just because he likes having them around, and that's where he is most of the time. So
those are guitars that they've come down. Like they used to be, I mean,
really,
in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, those were $6,000 to $8,000. Now
wow,
they're like 4, 5. That's a guitar that I rarely like tack towards and save money and buy an expensive guitar for myself. But
yeah,
that's one that I hope that I would find something like.
yeah. And listeners, we know $4,000, $5,000.
Oh,
it's a hell of a lot of money to spend on a guitar. They're super expensive. We're talking vintage, expensive guitars. But when we're talking about the market being down, we're not talking about just those. We're talking about everything.
Yeah.
Most things. I'll say most things.
Okay.
Have trended down.
Because I think I can watch this segue. Okay. In the more affordable stuff, you have seen brands like we're coming out of this lull where this like total surge in the market to now we have huge surplus. That huge surplus has spun out into companies having too many guitars, like manufacturers having too many guitars.
Right.
So PRS tanked the value of the SEs because they dropped everything by 20%.
Right.
Here's the part. So the last couple of years I've worked for a PRS dealer, and what they did is they dropped the price retail on guitars that dealers had already bought at their normal discount.
Oh, no.
And then when the only way you would get that money back is that you would have to reorder. It was 1 for 1. Whatever guitar you sold, like, oh, we sold a custom 24 SE in charcoal. And they're like, okay, we don't have a charcoal, but we can get you one in whale blue. But it had to be pretty much 1 to 1. And but even then, they'd give you a little extra discount on that. It wasn't a 20% discount.
Yeah.
And then
that's rough.
And then you started looking at the used market on SEs. So like custom 24 SEs were going for like what, $650 to $750, and then that guitar sold new for $929 or something. Now they are $450. It just like it totally like screwed over the secondhand market on those more modern electric guitars. Fender did the same thing with all the players.
With not just the players, but they did it with a lot of the Squire line, even the upper Squire line, because it's never been said, but it's been speculated that during the surge they bought more slots in their overseas manufacturers to buy more guitars, and then by the time those guitars were made and in America, the lull had started, and so now they were sitting on this surplus of classic player, classic vibe, all that series of guitars. And so they suddenly got really hard to move to the point that I bought a classic vibe bass on one of their sales last year. Was it last year or a year and a half? It was 2 years ago. It was in 2022 in November. I bought a classic vibe jazz bass for like $250 shipped to my door directly from Fender.
Grief.
Yeah.
Okay. Direct from Fender. That's the other part too.
Yeah.
Is that Fender has started competing with their own dealers.
Yeah. Which
Taylor has done the same thing. Martin does it a little. I don't know if Martin does it.
Gibson has started doing it. You can buy direct from Gibson now.
Yeah. So it's a hard, like if you ask like the old school hard nosed dealers, that's where they're like, they're like, sure, I'm worried about Sweetwater. I'm more worried about Fender selling directly.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden they're not like Fender makes 40% more if they sell them at retail. Like, so usually it's 35 or 40% that they give to dealers.
Yeah, it's creating a really interesting place in the market. So while a lot of people want to look at the market being stalled a little bit and entirely blame it on, cost of living and other things that are happening, cost of goods is going up, and they are, like, things are happening. Definitely we're in like this weird economic space, and we won't get political because we don't. That's not what we do on this podcast. But we're in this weird situation where the economy is sort of stabilized, but prices are still rising. And there's a lot of speculation as to why. Not interested in debate, listeners. Really not. Sorry.
Yeah. I do think it's just trying to find when people say uncle, And we're starting to see that. You're starting to see. I mean, it's hard to tell because it's also summer, so sales are
There's a
slowing
lull in
down.
summer. Yeah. Well, we just had Marshall. Marshall just decided, new CEO at Marshall, new buyout.
Mm-hmm.
Supposedly, I like the words he's saying about how they're devoted to building Marshall amps and making what players want. Well, one of the first things they did was they decreased the price for Marshalls in the U.S. Like literally.
Hey.
So we used to pay a very high premium in the US compared to UK market. I don't know what that was. I don't know why. I don't know if it was a UK pride thing, wanted to give UK buyers a better deal than the US, but their biggest sales market is in the US. So why are you punishing? And you wondered why nobody was buying Marshall amps when I could buy a Friedman for less. But now the Marshalls are in this super weird space. I posted in the Discord today. I decided I have a 1989 hand wired Marshall that I bought used at a great deal. At a great deal. Well, then they dropped the price on all the Marshalls, and now it's just a good deal. But it's still a good deal. I'm still happy with it.
Yeah.
But I was deciding, I was pricing some things today to see what values are at on things because I do this fairly often. I went to Guitar Center. I was like, how much is a 1959 hand-wired Marshall head? 100-watt plexi reissue. Brand new. They are $2,500. They have two used ones at $2,600 and $2,900 because their used inventory hasn't been adjusted for the new lower price. And I feel like that happened with PRS when they dropped their prices on some things, and Fender, and when they start dropping the prices on things to get them, more encouragement to buy them and to clear out this overly inventory, they're hurting the used market as well because suddenly people don't want to sell at the prices that now they should be.
But I would say, I think the real silver lining is, what Fender did all this research and they found that 16 million people in the US started playing guitar in 2020. And so even if a third of those people are still around, all these things, it is the rare occasion in which cool stuff is cheaper. Okay. So I mean, right now, think about I had an Epiphone Les Paul in high school. It was one of the Korean made ones. It was pretty terrible. Yeah. And you look at that compared now to either the new Epiphones, the inspired by, or the traditionals. You look at the PRS. I think the custom 24s are a pretty perfect guitar. If I was in high school now and I wanted to play heavier stuff, that or the classic vibe. So I do think there's a silver lining to it.
I think right now, I've talked about this on the podcast before, and y'all are just tired of me talking about it, but I think the Epiphones that are being made now, and everybody lost their minds over the inspired by Gibson Custom Shop at Firebirds and the higher end Epiphones, which is a weird thing to say, but higher end Epiphone has sort of always existed. They've tried it a few different times.
Do you remember the Elitist?
I do remember the Elitist series.
Oh, gosh.
And then the Masterbuilt series. They made a couple of acoustics in that Masterbuilt series.
The AJs,
they were real good.
And they're still only $500 used.
Yep.
I just sold two of them at Hometown Music a little bit ago.
Look at that. But at the same time, those that were still so upset about the Firebird, I'm pretty sure I said this last week, you can still buy the $650 Epiphone Firebird, and it's a great guitar. You can buy a 335 at $600, $700. Or if you wait, you can buy it on the stupid deal of the day. If you want that Inverness screen, you can get it for $400.
Gosh.
They're still making great guitars. So I think we're still in a great place for guitars, and as guitarists and as culture, we have to be kind of smart about it. If, like you said earlier, don't sell if you don't have to. Because if money is the objective, if selling to make money back is the objective, don't sell if you don't have to.
Yeah.
Now, if you have money and you want to buy something with the potential of it being worth something later, now is your time. I don't know if we're at the bottom. I don't know. But I can tell you that right now, we're nowhere near the top is going to be good later, because that's the way these things work.
Yeah. So that's the thing. If you look... So looking at your investments, there's no 15-year window. This is a big Dave Ramsey thing. There's no 15-year window in the stock market in which you've not at least had an 8.5% return. And guitars are pretty similar. They keep up with inflation. And, so right now, most of the things we love are on sale. in some capacity or somewhere.
Yeah. It makes me sad. I've got most of the things I want already because I could buy
Right?
them at better prices
I
right now
know.
than I bought them.
That's funny. I won't hurt my feelings, but that's true. I'm at a place where I'm like, I own so many, like there are no holes. Like I have two guitars still being built for me, that will be done by the end of this year. And after that, I'm like, I don't need anything else.
No, there's no holes.
Yeah. I like
I
my,
have
I kept my American Pro 2 Strat because it was the first like big YouTube collaboration that a brand reached out. And I just have so much nostalgia with that guitar. But
yeah.
Baxter from Casino texts me every time he gets a Shell Pink 57. He's like, I'll give you a great deal, you know.
Well, it's funny. Let's before we get too close to the end of the show, the main episode, before we go over to Patreon for an extra episode, let's talk about Fender specifically for a second here because, in 2021, I went to Summer NAMM, and it happened. It was there.
Yeah.
Some people were there. It was pretty sad.
Yeah.
And I just recently, I went in January, this past January, to NAMM 2024. And of course, I had no California NAMM to draw on experience of. But a lot of people said, there may be life to this, because a lot of people had kind of thought NAMM was dead. Like that was it. There was no Fender, there was no Gibson, there was no Taylor, there was no, a lot of people just weren't doing it. But then January happened, and it was pretty good. I heard some people say that without any hard numbers, I don't have the hard numbers. I'm sure they're out there somewhere. I'm not paying some website that does this data to give me the numbers. But people that went there and have been to previous ones, they said, it feels about like 75, 80% of what it was before. I was like, okay. And that was from someone who was a notorious NAMM dissenter. And they said, no, it felt good.
Yeah.
He had nothing but good things to say about it. And now we've just learned this week, Fender said, we're coming back. I wonder what that means for Fender, kind of realizing that they need to be part of that community and part of that space. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that Fender coming back makes a lot of sense. I think Fender has always done really well to capture more of the young players. Gibson's always really concerned about being an aspirational brand, and they're aimed at an older demographic. Right now, I think the current, like, who is learning to play guitar, it's young women playing alternative, Americana, punk rock. That was the coolest thing in guitar retail the last couple of years that I saw, was like, oh, it's just like badass, cool, confident young women. And like, so we need to hire people in that same demographic. It can't just be like, the old white guys.
A bunch of 40 to 6-year-old dudes trying to sell them Epiphone Les Pauls.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, man. If I would have got my tape on the radio, we'd be bigger than Whitesnake right now.
Well, Whitesnake is not big right now, right?
Yeah.
It's like, all right. That's what you want to be like.
All right, 38 special.
Ain't no good music come out since 1990.
Those dudes are so
grunge
around.
Killed good music.
Yeah. Now it's all that bleep blorp music.
Yeah, exactly. It's I'm glad you said that, because I've not really talked to anybody who has a shop and sort of asked about the demographic, and hoping that there was a lot of headway and a lot of talk about creating a more inclusive scene around. See, here's the thing that people forget. Music, the art form, has always been inclusive. And okay, no, I should not say always. Y'all, I didn't say always. I did say it, but I didn't mean it. It is an inclusive environment that's had room to grow, and it has. Guitar as an instrument and that space has been really not for a long time. And it felt like 2020 happened, the boom happened, and like people started making headway, but I didn't know how much of it was still holding, right?
Yeah, and it's a long cycle for those things to get from front of mind, socially aware, social media, in culture, moving down into like really like, especially brick and mortar retail. So I know hometown is very much kind of, we're the only one doing it that I knew of, within 100 miles, 200 miles of us. I would talk to the other guys that own shops, and for them, it's like, well, it's me and it's Ron, and then Tony comes in on the weekends, and it's just like, it's the guys in their 50s to 60s, and like I don't think there's any like, they are not. They feel no tension towards young women learning how to play. I think they just don't know how to relate, and they're also not taking the other step of like, hey, our business is growing, and we should hire young women. So, in my time at hometown,
they're not adversarial to the idea of women coming in and buying guitars, playing music, and they're just not pushing it.
They're not they're not going to make like who they staff in their shop. They're not going to change those decisions yet.
Yeah.
So we were the first ones. We hired 2 young women to work at the shop, and it just changed the total dynamic in a really, really wonderful way. Because you start seeing, once you start working with young women, you start seeing like, you take so much more crap than I do, or like you just get it. They just get more like, we'll get guys calling the shop like, hey, is that little girl working today? I'm like,
oh my God.
And so I always just,
and the worst part is that exact quote.
Yeah,
absolutely. If y'all think he's that Jeremy's exaggerating, that is not the exact phrase. That is absolutely the exact phrase.
No, so a couple weeks ago before I left, somebody came in and they were like, hey, you look so cute today. And I looked at him. I was like, it's like, you have not said that to me in years. Like, that's right. My strategy for life is to say true things funny.
Yes.
Like, I mean it. You've not told me I'm pretty.
Yeah. Why don't you tell me that I'm pretty when I smile?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or that I should smile.
Yeah, I should smile more.
Yeah.
See, we're going to end on the rage notes. I'm not going to do this.
Sorry. Okay. Fender coming back is a very good, it's a very good thing. It shows that they're plugged in to the current climate of who's playing guitar. It's not all good, because I still think there is a component of Fender. I mean, Fender Play has been really successful and made good money for them. I think the other component is, I do think that they are coming up against is an uncomfortable territory where they are competing against their own dealers.
Yeah. I think that's going to be stressful for dealers, because we need our brick and mortar stores. I maybe I'm the only one that sees it this way, and I live in a fairly remote area when it comes to like guitar stores. Like, we have our local store that I love. But they're not really getting in the stuff I'm interested in. They're more of a first guitar kind of store, first, second guitar kind of store. I have to drive to Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, Jackson, Mississippi, or Memphis, Tennessee, or honestly, Nashville, Tennessee is 4.5 hours from here. So that's where I have to drive. So I have to drive to those places to find the stuff that's interesting to me. So we still need our brick and mortar stores, and we need them to do well. We don't need the major manufacturers writing them out of the equation.
Yeah. The last thing that is interesting. So when Sam Ash announced that they're closing, so most of these small shops, you have to choose, and you schedule out over 12 months what you hope to get in from a dealer. Usually they're like, you'll get 60%, 70% of this list. And we will, you'll get 60, 70% of this over the 12 months. We did that with Martin and Fender and PRS. And as soon as Sam Ash, within a week of them announcing that they were canceling, all of our orders got fulfilled, which means you get billed on those things and your terms start. And so it is another way in which the big companies overbought, the manufacturers overbuilt. And then when it hits the fan, it comes down to like the small and medium shops end up carrying the bag. And so that's where like a lot of small shops right now probably have a lot of inventory. Prices are going down. And they got those bills ticking away if they're running on terms, or if they're cash flow. Oh gosh. So
yeah, every second that stuff is on the wall, they're losing money.
absolutely.
So yeah, so y'all, I hope you've appreciated a little bit of the glimpse behind the wall into the retail space of musical instruments. I know I have. That's why I love talking to you, Jeremy, is I get to hear some of the stuff I don't hear not being in that space.
Yeah.
I'm in that secondhand, that the flippers market, or
I'm
the whatever you want to call
I'm
it.
glad to be back headed more in that direction. It
Yeah.
is real stressful being in the
Yeah, I totally believe it. Well, we're going to head over to Patreon and we're going to talk about more fun stuff and happier stuff. I didn't mean to be doom and gloom here at the end. We should have talked the doom and gloom at the top and talked the fun stuff at the end. But listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope you come back to join us again next week or the next, depending on when the next episode comes. It's summertime. And it's not just a lull in guitar sales. My job gets busier in the summer. But Jeremy will be around. We're going to hang out. Who knows? Y'all may see some stuff in the future. Since Jeremy's going to be so close to me now, I'm going to go bug him.
Yeah.
We'll go guitar hunting in New Orleans and see how that goes.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So, Jeremy, anything else before we switch over to Patreon?
No, that's all I got.
All right. Well, y'all click the links down below. You can find Jeremy and all the things that I've linked below. I don't even know what they are yet because I haven't written them. So, but there are links down there.
They're going to be thoughtful. They're going to be articulate, thought-provoking.
Yeah, they're gonna start with HTTPS and they're gonna end with .com probably. I don't know, y'all. Sorry, I'm gonna stop. This is getting ridiculous. I'm obviously getting tired. But listeners, thank you for hanging out. Go over to Patreon, check it out if you want to keep helping the show going, or if you want to go hear the next episode. Patreon.com/40watt podcast. And until we talk again, be good to yourselves, be kind to each other, and make some noise.